All right, excellent. So let me start from where I thought I was going to start and say, Utsqual. Whoa. And I want to begin by saying, Hajkasiem Sieyumach Mistimach, which means thank you to the wise and respected ones of this place. And I'm very happy to be here as the kind of, I said, MC for this VIU Research Showcase. My name is Katharine Rollwagen. I'm the chair of the history department, also a director. I'm wearing many hats tonight. And I'm going to introduce the two students from the history department who are going to be telling us a bit about their research. In typical fashion, knowing what an academic semester is like, I asked 5 students initially if they wanted to present their research, and all of them eagerly said yes. And by the beginning of yesterday, there were 2. There were 2 standing. So, and they're both, well, I don't know about Steve, but I know that Audrey she handed in her research project early. So she's on the ball. So they're going to come up and speak one at a time. But before they do, I just wanted to say, or express, I guess, the history department's thanks, because it has been supporting our students through scholarships for a number of years. The Ethel Barrowclaw Memorial History Award and the Peggy Nichols Memorial Award have been given out, I believe, every year that I've been there, and that's 10 years, and going back much further than that. And these are awards for students taking upper-level courses who are in the course of their studies and are doing research that focuses ideally on local history. Sometimes that doesn't happen every year, and then it's like, okay, we start to widen the circle a little bit. Vancouver Island history, British Columbia history. We try to keep it as close to home as possible and using primary sources in their research as much as possible. Another project that is focused at the university that the NHS has supported in various ways through the years is the Canadian Letters and Images Project, which is directed by Dr. Stephen Davies. And I only learned this recently. It still kind of blows me away. CLIP is, the CLIP website and the database is the university's most visited webpage. So it's used by teachers across the country, and it's been used in hundreds of research projects. It's a database of letters and images that all were written by Canadians serving overseas in conflicts. Well, I say overseas, but there's some letters there from the Northwest Rebellion. That wasn't overseas. And the Boer War, the First World War, the Second World War, even a few collections from the Korean War now. And I believe one, might not be online yet, from Afghanistan. So this is the largest digital and open source collection of its kind in the whole country. And you can visit it there. I included this collage, which I know you can't read, but it's purely for effect. Those are all of the books up until maybe 2021 that have used CLIP in their research. These are all published books, some of them by very, good stuff's happening with CLIP. Okay, so I want to begin the research part of the presentation by inviting our first speaker, Audrey Behan, to come up. She is in the second year of her BA program, and she's going to talk about the research that she conducted for History 340, which is called Work and Workers in Canada. And I'm going to get the slides here for you.
All right, so I'm Audrey Behan, and I'm a second year, and my research is on the reasons for the 1912 Vancouver Island coal miners' strike. Okay, and also the pictures you see are ones that I've used in my blog that I made with this information. So why I chose this topic is because I'm an English major and a history minor, but I'm very interested in history, and especially anything local or Canadian, I have a passion in. And I enjoy this because I could widen my knowledge, and I knew nothing about mining before this, so it was very interesting to do a whole project on this. Okay, so here are my findings. Okay, so this is so, yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. So in 1912 Vancouver coal miners' strike, there was many reasons for it to begin. I feel like a lot of things focus on, yes, they talk about the reasons, but a lot is about the strike itself. So one of the reasons for this is because of miner rights and the want to unionize, because companies were able to fire workers for no reason and not listen to grievances if they didn't want to, and it was unfair in the workplace. So miners wanted more rights to and control over their work. And also wages were a problem, because I found that pay was considered generally high for miners, but it was not always the case, because the miners' wages were not sufficient enough to sustain a family, because usually families in this time were male breadwinner, and miners had irregular employment, and wages did not account for work stoppages or the danger of the mines and lack of security, such as being able to just fire workers anytime they wanted with no compensation. So the wages offered to employees were take it or leave it. They had no say in this. And workers wanted a standard minimum wage because there was a lot of underpaying workers. Another reason is because mines, as you can believe, are very dangerous. Death rates were extremely high, and the poor working conditions just did not help this in these mines. And because companies didn't do much about this, and there was a lack of response to safety concerns. And also, explosions were very common. In fact, they were the reason for 63% of miner deaths. There was very poor ventilation, as you can imagine, and the use of machines would cause coal dust to just everywhere, and that would heighten the risk of explosions and would impact miner health and affected the hearing. So you can imagine trying to work in an enclosed space with all this going on. While I did my research, I found it interesting to focus also on women's concerns, as they did not work in the mines, but they as well had concerns that led to the strike. Because of the poor mine safety, this affected women as well, because it had a negative impact on family stability and well-being, because women and children would worry about the safety of their male relatives working in the mine, and you never knew if something bad would happen to your husband or your dad, and see if they ever came back, really. And if your husband was to die, you'd be left to care for your children alone. And this happening brought attention to the difficulties and loss suffered, and would spread of why danger of the mines affected the whole community. Also in research, I found it interesting the amount of research that talked about Chinese workers. Chinese workers were paid even lower wages in comparison to Canadian miners because of their race. And there's a lot of disdain towards the Chinese from Canadian miners because they believed they would take over their job, and also because they were willing to take lower pay because they just wanted to survive. And they had poor working conditions and very poor living conditions on top of this, and a family as well to look after, which was harder with even lower pay. The most interesting aspects I found of the research was I did a lot of looking through archives, especially for pictures. Most of them I got from the Cumberland archive, which is online, so it was easy to look through. And there is a lot of pictures on there. It's very cool to check out because there's just so much, and it's hard to pick pictures. There's so many interesting things, and you can learn a lot just from looking through pictures. I also went through a lot of Vancouver Sun newspapers from that time, which was also really interesting, because even searching keywords, you find a lot of stuff just not related to this even. That's very interesting. Okay. With my findings, I've created a blog. This came from trying something new, because I've never made a blog before. It was very interesting, and I feel like it's a good way to display information. Because with an essay, you can't include the pictures, and I feel like, especially with mining, pictures are a very important part of this history. And in this way, I'm able to, with a blog, you can explore like women's concerns and Chinese miners' concerns and incorporate it easier without having essay format and trying to put that in somewhere. This was much easier. And yeah, using pictures, of course, so much fun. And I feel like it came together really well. And yeah, thank you for listening to this presentation. This has been, thank you.
Escape, yeah. That's good. Okay. I think I might just use the handheld mic. Oh, okay, I think this one's good. I think this one's good, yeah? Yeah, okay. Oh, so much more comfortable. Thank you for persevering through that, Audrey. Yes, thank you very much. Audrey, I'm just going to go back here for a second. And, okay. So Audrey mentioned that she made a blog for her research, and we can maybe include a link to it somewhere if people are interested in taking a look at it. And I just wanted to kind of build off that a little bit in a way that we totally didn't practice, because all of the students in History 340 are doing different types of research dissemination, and they're expected to present their research in a format other than a traditional research essay. And there's still, I mean, we teach more than 30 different history courses at VIU every year, so there's a lot of essays being written. There's a lot of Chicago-style formatting being enforced, you can ask. But I really want to challenge the students in this course, particularly because it is the history of work and workers. It's supposed to be the history from the ground up. We talk about social history, to think about ways that their research could reach audiences beyond me as their professor, and beyond the kind of more traditional academic format. And a lot of students embrace the opportunity to create blogs or graphic histories, so using the graphic format to tell the history of a particular strike, in that case the Hospital Employees Union strike in 2002, which is relatively recent. I remember that. Some of them record their findings as mini podcasts. Yesterday, one of them created and presented a poster at the Create conference up at VIU, or to represent their research in a more artistic format, and then explain to me in a paper the connection between, for example, this sweater and female textile workers and the work of producing textiles. Or this one's a collage about the Chinese school student strike in Victoria in the 1920s, right? And all everything has a symbolism or a reason that's explained in their research. Mm-hmm. So before I bring Steve up, I brought a few panels tonight because I did have more presentations planned, and then attrition happened. I brought some of the panels from the museum exhibit that some students at VIU did last year, and which was supported by funding from one of the NHS Laynard Legacy grants. And it was called Beyond the Bar. It was exploring Nanaimo's food histories. The students, this is a word cloud that I made using all of the research reports. So the students in History 358, which was the history of Vancouver Island, did a whole bunch of research on various aspects of food history in Nanaimo or the surrounding area, and they submitted their research reports. This word cloud was made from their research reports, just to give you a sense of the types of themes and ideas that came up in, like potato. There was a whole report on BC ferries and ferry food, all kinds of the cost of food, local food, the canneries. The Wakasaya farm featured quite largely in their research. They found it fascinating that where they go to school used to be the coal mining company farm. So they did those research reports, and then the students in History 480 took that research and transformed it into the museum exhibit that was at the Nanaimo Museum in the public, the community gallery for a number of months. So just as an example of the type of research that goes into this and the type of things that they got into, I asked one student, Samadhi Sukadana, who's graduating this year, and he just got accepted to the law school at UVic. I hoped he could come tonight, but he has a choir practice. So I asked him if I could share a little bit of what he was doing. He got really interested in cookbooks, and he wanted to ask what could he learn from looking at cookbooks that community organizations produced and often sold as fundraisers for various reasons. And he initially had a difficult time finding digitized copies of Nanaimo-produced cookbooks. But he was able to use ARCA, which is a digital repository, and it contains a couple of cookbooks. In particular, you can see the Women's Auxiliary to the Nanaimo Hospital cookbook from 1952, the His, Hers Favorite Recipes from Brecon United Church in 1955, and then personal recipes from the Evening Circle Women's Association, I believe it's the Wellington United Church, in 1963. So we had a good span there. And what Sam did kind of blew me away. He went through these cookbooks and he created a database or a spreadsheet where every recipe in the cookbook got its own line in the spreadsheet. So what type of food is it? Who's the author? What's the focus or the main food in the recipe? Is it a food that they're asking you to change from its original format? Is it a casserole? There's a lot of casseroles. What page is it on? So we created this whole spreadsheet, which can then be sorted. How many people created multiple recipes? Do you find the same names in multiple cookbooks? Are there any commonalities? This could be used really to make a comparison to other cookbooks in other places, for example. And then he did things like this. So you can ask questions like, well, what was the most common main ingredient in these recipe books, right? And he found it interesting that there was certainly a focus on beef and pork, but also, some other, he noticed, salmon and clams, and he made references to other seafood that he thought, well, maybe this reflects the fact that we're on Vancouver Island, perhaps. And he had lots of questions that came out of this. Not so much answers, but more so questions. And I think he had a lot of fun. Well, something he noticed that he thought was really interesting, obviously, women tend to be the authors and the organizers of these cookbooks, but the His, Hers Favorite Recipes included an entire section of male recipes that had been donated, the male gourmet, so to speak. So that's very interesting. And one in particular that he thought was worth noting was Nanaimo's first energy shake, basically. Penny's Tiger Milk, milk, banana, honey, it's basically a smoothie, skim milk, wheat germ, and brewer's yeast. It says, mix above thoroughly, drink for health and bulging muscles. Submitted by Alvin Stockwell. So you can see how asking the students to get into, topics that at first, they're kind of like, what am I going to learn from a cookbook? But when they start asking those questions and doing this type of analysis was really set the bar quite high. And then taking this and asking the students to transform that into the museum panel. A lot of what we see here does not end up on a 50-word, 75-word panel in a museum exhibit. So I'm going to stop there. I'm going to ask our next and headlining speaker to come up. Steve Wood is currently an honors student in the history department, and he's going to talk about the work he's doing as part of that program.
Hi everyone. So when Katharine told us that we had 7 to 10 minutes for our presentation, let's just say I'm glad that a few students dropped out. So I'm Steve Wood. I'm going to speak to you about my currently ongoing project called Malaspina Memories, which seeks to uncover the perspectives and experiences of students, faculty, and staff who attended or worked at Malaspina College, which is VIU's predecessor institution, in the decade from its opening in 1969. I don't know if you know who any of these people are, but I think this guy is Karl Opgard, who was the first president of Malaspina. So VIU is like a second home to me because of my studies and because my wife teaches there. So it seemed like a good choice for an honors project. So I guess you could charitably call me a fifth-year student. So this idea grew from a desire to record the as yet unrecorded institutional history of VIU from its opening to the present day. After I met with the librarians in charge of VIU's special collections, I realized that my idea for the institutional history was, to put it mildly, extremely overambitious. So I changed tack. So I settled on doing an oral history of Malaspina College and narrowing the time frame down to a decade. My initial thinking was to consider only students and how their experiences changed throughout the 1970s. However, having done some preliminary research into the history of post-secondary education and having read some student reflections from the time, I realized that it would only be illustrating a narrow view of the institution, one slice of the pie, so to speak. So thus I broadened the focus to gain a wider view of the institution through the eyes of both faculty and the staff, in addition to the alumni. I realized that relational aspects of people's experiences were key to locating interesting histories, and not only between these groups, but also between the institution and the local area. So why did I choose oral history? Well, I've learned that there is a lot of written history about Malaspina College, too much for me to begin to properly consider for a project of this scale. So this is kept in the form of the yearly college calendars, which are still available online, newsletters such as mainly Malaspina and the College Bulletin, and these were weekly outputs. The student newspaper, The Navigator, which at times was also a weekly output, and innumerable other sources such as local newspaper reports. So I've certainly used some of these to form a picture of what Malaspina looked like, but this is only part of the story. I'm fascinated by oral history as a means to record the minutiae of everyday life. What is missing from these historical sources is what doesn't get written down and what is continually lost, namely the interesting personal and relational perspectives of those who lived through these times. Oral history initially sprung up as an idea because I was at the time recording my dad's history, and because of experiences of using oral history in 2 previous classes, one of which I had with Katharine. As I thought more about this project, I realized that almost 56 years have elapsed since Malaspina College opened. So many of its first personalities are no longer with us. And it's therefore important for our understanding of the institution to record the voices of those who are still here before the opportunity no longer exists. This has been especially brought home to me this semester as I lost my dad in January. I feel fortunate to have learnt more about him through recording his history, and feel a renewed onus to do the same for Malaspina College's earliest personalities. Don't worry, only 3 more pages to go. So, I finished writing this today, which is why I'm reading almost verbatim from it. I'm extremely busy with this project. So in order to make the best of this project, the planning stage was extensive. An initial idea to find participants was to hold an event where people could come in to see photos of Malaspina's first decade. This would then lead to group interviews, which I intended to video. However, I realized that if one participant then chose to withdraw, the whole interview would be wasted. I went back to the drawing board and realized that individual tailored interviews would be likely to provide the greatest sources of information. I made a project plan and submitted it for faculty approval, which I received in May last year. The next natural step was to undertake an oral history course, which gave me practical grounding in how to undertake interviews, including creating a space for comfortable, honest exchange. I learned that oral history is primarily collaborative, with shared authority, and can be used to create and strengthen connections. It would be a great way to unearth new historical information and create new understandings of the known history, and it made me really excited to get started on this project. Since I am working with people, I had to apply for the approval of VIU's Research Ethics Board, which helped me to further codify the format and goals of the project. This also entailed thinking closely about how to gain ongoing permission from the participants, and also led me to confirm that I could store the interviews with VIU's special collections and the Nanaimo Community Archives for the use of future researchers. My project goals thus became the intention of participants rekindling ties with the institution and with old friends, as I had learned that good oral history creates and strengthens connections directly benefiting participants. I also hope that sharing my findings will help to create and strengthen new relationships between VIU and the local community. The ability of oral history to unearth new information about Malaspina would be achieved in a way that also adds personality, color, and vibrancy to the known history. And analyzing the interviews can help us to understand the factors in participants' lives that affect why certain memories and feelings have persisted. The ability to store the interviews is also important, which means that they are retained for posterity. This also means that, I wrote as seems likely, but as is the case. If I record more interviews than I can analyze for this project, they will be available for my own future analysis and for others to analyze too. From a personal perspective, my goal was to create a greater affinity for my adopted home and to use this experience as a precursor to doing more oral history in the community. So my project format and goals decided, and with Research Ethics Board approval, the fall semester of 2024 was used to collate and interrogate the history of post-secondary education in Canada and BC specifically, as well as the history of Malaspina and the local area. Having this information will allow me to contrast the experiences and perspectives of Malaspina's personalities with the wider zeitgeist. During this time, I was also lucky enough to be awarded some funding from our very own lovely Nanaimo Historical Society, which allowed me to purchase a voice recorder and covered the cost of my oral history course. So this is from Malaspina's first home, where it was from 1969 to 1976. And this is basically where everybody hung out. So there was a food outlet in here, and I've heard that students played pretty much endless games of bridge. This is the outhouse, which was the old hospital laundry. So, given my personal loss early in the semester, I had to take some time to myself. Having restarted the project last month, participant recruitment is ongoing. I initially identified names from the primary sources, including the Navigator and the college calendars, with the intention to have an even coverage of the first decade and to interview roughly 15 people. Aye, right. I have experienced success in finding contact information for potential participants in several ways. Contacting departments at VIU has led to finding emails for participants, while web searches have gleaned Facebook accounts that I have messaged, as well as telephone numbers. However, without question, the most successful recruitment tool has been what's called snowball sampling. So this is an oral history term for a participant putting the researcher in touch with more participants, and another way that they can kind of renew and rekindle those old relationships as well. Snowball sampling has put me in contact with, I wrote 10 people, but that has actually changed again today. So I think we're on 13 people so far, out of about 20 that I have contacted. This has also had the fortunate side effect of helping to renew old friendships. Look at that, I'm so good that I just forgot I wrote it. The method by which I send the project information is email, which hasn't yet proved an issue. Again, this is proved untrue today. Although I have offered to provide hard copies of the information if necessary. So that's what I've had to do. I think it was 3 people got back to me today, and they said, basically, I can't use a computer. I was like, okay, so we'll do everything hard copy, and once you're done, just let me know. You can call me, and I'll come and pick them up. So this fulfills the research ethics piece of making the project as accessible as possible. Given the busy lives and various pressures on their time, finding participants and keeping them on the hook requires constant chasing and reminders. I'm so glad that the oral history course I took advocated for making connections prior to the interview itself, which I achieved through a preliminary meeting. So far, I have met roughly 12 people for preliminary meetings, which provides a great opportunity primarily to break the ice and begin to develop a relationship. They can see me and ask about the project. We can discuss any consent and privacy issues and start from a position of honesty and respect. This is an opportunity for the participant to begin to talk about their life, and it helps enormously in refreshing their memories. I've also started to send them an email link to a Dropbox folder, those that are computer savvy, containing documentation and photos from Malaspina's first decade that I've collated. They can use this to recognize old faces and picture themselves back in their old environs. I leave them with the preliminary questions that help me to tailor their interview, and then wait for them to contact me after they've completed the questions and feel ready to interview. That dog's famous. It's on 2 slides. So having made a personal connection during the preliminary meeting means that both of us, but I think primarily me, feel less nervous when it comes to the interview. I don't know why I chose to do this, because I used to have like the world's worst stutter, and it used to take me like 10 minutes to say anything. So, crazy, I guess. So far I've met around 13 people for preliminary meetings, which provides a great opportunity primarily to break the ice, as I said, and begin to develop a relationship. Oh, I've said that already. Oh, seriously. My brain is so tired. Okay, where are we? There we go. I ensure that the location of the interview is accessible, the consent forms are signed, and that the participant understands their power over the interview process. In this project, I've learned to roll with the punches and make changes as and when necessary. So a really good example of this is my newfound willingness to record interviews over video messaging to increase project accessibility for those potential participants who don't live locally and are computer savvy. The interviews, informed by the preliminary questions, discuss topics including protest and prejudice, and may therefore necessitate revisiting uncomfortable memories. As oral historian Stacy Zembrishki put it, I don't know how to say that name, but I really like her work. We have an oath to do no harm. So therefore, as part of the ethical piece, participants can stop the interview, refuse to answer, and we also discuss beforehand if any topics are off limits. We also discuss the duty not to say anything on the recording that could reflect negatively on an individual person. I have also taken to recording any admissions of illegality, so typically drug use, after the interview is completed. So I write down the participant's response, check its accuracy with them, and then save it without their name attached. So meaning that this information is immediately granted anonymity. Given that the interviews discuss a participant's upbringing, schooling, and their in-depth experiences at Malaspina, they can take 2 hours. However, participants have the freedom to take breaks or to split up the interview. There we go. Almost there, people, almost there. It is important to maintain that respectful, collaborative relationship after the interview is completed. Part of the ethics piece is to provide the interview transcript to the participant and allow them to make whatever changes and clarifications they desire. This is also my own opportunity to seek clarification or make comments or questions that I wish to share with the participant. Giving editing power to participants potentially means that they can alter their words in such a way that the conversational aspect or language used is irrevocably altered. However, this was a stipulation of the Research Ethics Board and is therefore a necessary component. The other aspect is that given that this is a collaboration, until 30 days after the interview date, a participant can withdraw and all of their information must be deleted. Placing the person ahead of the data means that their welfare and choices are key. So the transcript format I'm using is what's called intelligent verbatim, where the participants' words are kept, but with certain parts of the transcript tidied up. For example, if they accidentally use the wrong word and then correct themselves. For narrative flow, it makes sense to delete that wrong word from the transcript, but this step is obviously the very first one in data analysis. So getting further into data analysis, I will interrogate not only how a person's responses reflect on and add to the existing historical information, but also muse over the effect of their background and experiences, the fascinating subject of what we remember and why we remember as we do. This project will see me create an essay to fulfill my honours accreditation, and I also intend to create a presentation that I can give to the local community, as well as a journal article for an undergraduate journal, such as Western University's The Mirror. And I'd also love to write something for the BC History magazine. Finally, as I said, I intend to reposit the research data in the local community archives and in VIU's special collections, and seek consent from every participant to do so. This would help to sustain an ongoing project and also be useful to future researchers. So I think we should all drink some Applejack now and just be done. Thank you.
Can I ask Audrey, can you come back up? And Steve, can you stay up for a second? Just in case people have questions. I just want to say thanks again to Steve and Audrey. They both took time in a very, very busy time. Tomorrow is the last day of term and exams start on Monday. And everyone is running around campus like chickens with their heads cut off. So yeah, I really appreciate them taking the time and challenging themselves to come and speak to a room full of mostly strangers and a few friends.
Thanks, Kathy. On behalf of the Nanaimo Historical Society, I'd like to thank both of you for presenting tonight, and I would like to present these as a little token of our appreciation for your coming.
Thank you very much.
And please keep up the good work, and Kathy, well done. Thank you.
These presenters are at the front of the room. I'm going to ask if there are people that want to make a comment or ask questions to clarify, or if you just as soon go and have a cup of tea and then talk to them face to face. David?
I'm just inquiring of the research that he's done of the history of this 10-year decade. Have you found that there are other colleges and universities are doing something similar, or is this a new thing? I just don't know.
That's a really good question. I've found so far 2 instances of this being done at other universities, and that's it. So, which strikes me as so strange, but that's what I found after a pretty extensive search. And I think the way that I want to go about it is going to be, without wishing to blow my own horn in any way, is going to be very in depth, you know. Whereas the histories that I've seen, these 2 other histories that I've seen, they're very sparse in their choice of participant. So there aren't many people who are giving their perspectives. So I'm hoping that as I get more people, it kind of strengthens the results that I'm getting, if that makes sense.
Anybody else? Susan?
Can you remind me of the years you're looking for people?
Yeah.
There you go.
Dearie me. Yeah, so it's 1969, and the cutoff is ostensibly the first day of 1980.
Oh, okay.
So-
and do you have a way of like a public way of people contacting you if they're interested?
That's a good question. So I'm actually, through Katharine is a really good way. And I'm also working on a admittedly overdue press release, which I'm hoping to release through VIU soon. So that will provide a way for people to get in touch with me. Because one of the interesting things is the vocational training school merged with Malaspina in 1971. And to date, I've had a real hard time finding people who were affiliated with the vocational training school during this time, because I'm really interested to see how people felt about this meld, as it's been called.
Does someone have a comment for Audrey?
I'm just saying, you got in touch with me through LinkedIn, so that might be another option.
Yeah. There's been so many ways to get in touch with people. It's been very confusing. Then as the number of people increases, you just have to deal with like 20 emails a day and constantly chasing people up, and then people are still trying to contact me through Facebook, and I'm saying, please use email, because that's the research ethics board part, where, we need to keep your responses as private as we can, So yeah, there's so many ways, which is good, I can imagine it, without having the internet, doing this would be 20 times harder.
David?
Question for Audrey is, I'm wondering what kind of percentage of ladies you found were actually involved. Was there any that were actually in the mines, or were they more of the support of their spouses and family?
I found there was a lot more just support. What was interesting is there's a lot of women that were heavily participating in the strike itself, which sadly wasn't part of the reasons for. But there's a lot of interesting stuff about like women that were shocking the community really in participating in those strikes, and sometimes there was violence that would outbreak and women were a part of that. So I found that very interesting.
Thank you.
You mentioned Chinese, and since it's a bachelor culture, there wouldn't be families necessarily to support them. Do we have any records? I mean, how did they live? The miners, the Chinese miners, did they live together? Did they live in Chinatown? I want everything, but
Of what I know most of them were living, I'm not sure exactly, but they were like little camps that were like very poor conditions. I'm not sure how many families were in Canada, but I know a lot of them sent money back to China where their family was, as they would come here to work. I'm not completely sure, but I just know that the conditions were very rough.
Okay, let's break for tea. Thank you for coming tonight.